Wrestling fans, promoters, wrestlers, and anyone who enjoys pro wrestling now have something new to be excited about. The Wrestling Fans International Association, the WFIA, is back. WFIA is an association that exists to promote, grow, and support professional wrestling throughout the world. Membership is free. Your membership includes a free digital bi-monthly publication of the Wrestling Fan News newsletter, association updates, voting privileges, and much more. Please go to thewfia.org, that's THEWFIA.org, and become a member today.
All right, everybody, welcome to the PWZ podcast. I want to welcome a very special guest here today, B. Brian Blair. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Rick. I appreciate you having me on PWZ.
Thank you. Basically, I want to go through your career a little bit. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about your book and other stuff. So, but I understand you had a sports background before professional wrestling. You were into football and other such things.
Yeah, I played football. I actually lettered in 4 sports. I was first 4-sport athlete at Tampa Bay Tech.
Wow.
Baseball, football, track and field, which ran simultaneously with wrestling, and football. I had to give up and make a choice, and I whittled it down to 3 sports. We only have 3 years of high school, or did at that time. We had our sophomore, junior, and senior years, and so my junior year, I whittled it down to 3 sports, senior year to 2 sports, just football and wrestling. And that's what I really concentrated on. And I got a football scholarship I signed at University of Tampa. And they folded football. Back then, we had no entertainment in Tampa, Florida. We didn't have the Buccaneers. We didn't have the Rays or the Rowdies or the Lightning. And it was UT football, where I had a couple of heroes there. One was Freddie Solomon, God bless his soul, and the other one was Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, God bless his soul as well. And I used to sell sodas in the stadium, and I'd put my sodas to the side and watch the offense, and I was just really into it and dreamed about playing there, and finally graduated, and the Buccaneers were coming in 76. They blamed the grades of the football players on getting rid of the football program. That said that was bringing down their academic numbers for UT. I'm sure that somehow Tampa Bay made some kind of deal with UT that was good for both of them. And but anyway, it broke a lot of hearts. I went to a few different places. Other places I got recruited by, and eventually Vince Gibson at the University of Louisville talked me into going to Louisville. So I actually played for St. Leo while I was all this transition took place, because everybody had given away. They only get 30 scholarships, so they had given away their 30 scholarships. So I had to wait a semester, and I played club football at up in just north of us in Dade City at a really, really beautiful university called St. Leo College, and then went to Louisville.
Nice. When did your interest in professional wrestling come about?
First injury?
For interest.
Oh, my first interest.
Yeah.
Oh God, when I was really young, Rick, I'd say like I moved to Tampa when I was 11, just about 11. I was like 10 and a half, 11, started 5th grade. And not long after that, I saw this the end of the wrestling match on a Saturday on WTOG channel 44. And I saw this cool guy say, "So long from the Sunshine State." It was Gordon Soley. And I saw just a little bit, maybe 1 minute of action. And it left me like, oh, what was that? So I couldn't wait till the next Saturday to watch, and then I was hooked. it was great, and really fell in love with this guy Jack Briscoe, and
Oh, yeah.
Briscoe's brother. He was just tremendous, and it's amazing how a guy, that I watched selling sodas in the stadium, Paul Orndorff, and then a guy I watched playing in a band, Ruckus, Hulk Hogan, and just different people. A guy like Jack Briscoe, who was he was like the greatest thing I could ever, greatest human being athlete I could ever imagine, and just becoming such close friends with him. You never know what's going to happen down the road. This is all good stuff. I see Gerald Briscoe all the time. Since I'm the fortunate enough to be the president and the CEO of the Cauliflower Alley Club, I see lots of my wrestling family, every year, and so many guys live in Tampa, Rick, that we have lunches all the time. I have still going with the Legends Lunch, which started in 1999. And every 3 months or sometimes 4 months, once a year, we do 4 months, like this month, instead of because of CAC, we push it up a month. So instead of the last Friday in September, we'll do the last Friday in October. So many of the wrestlers come there. So many are located in the Bay Area. Very, very talented people, current wrestlers, former wrestlers, rising stars that are training in the Performance Center, commuting from here to Orlando. Many of them have moved to Orlando, but a lot of talent comes out of this area.
Yeah. I guess it was one of the hottest areas at one point, probably in the 70s and 80s, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Florida was like the territory after I got to understand the business. Everybody wanted to come to Florida because the payoffs were decent.
Mm-hmm.
The weather's beautiful, and you have no state taxes. So people would come here. I mean, Ivan Koloff, Superstar Billy Graham, you name them. I mean, they came through here.
So, of course, this gentleman was a legendary trainer, but you trained under Hiro Matsuda, of course, legendary wrestler as well. What was it like training with this gentleman on your side?
It was very difficult.
That's what I hear.
Very, very difficult. He didn't play games, and he really wanted to run people off more than he wasn't that interested in training wrestlers. He was more interested in stretching them, making them holler. And if you kind of hung in there, well, you had to hang in there because I stayed there for 3 summers like a dummy training, and I shouldn't say that. It was all good. And the only 3 people that stayed during those 3 summers were Paul Orndorff and Hogan and myself. So it was tough. I mean, Hindu squats, push-ups, just till the first couple of days I puked. The third day I didn't puke. He fell out of the ring and just laid there, and he took his foot, and because he always wrestled barefoot, just a pair of black tights, and he could do all those pushes. He'd do all the push-ups and Hindu squats right with you. So it wasn't like he was telling you to do them. It was like he was actually doing them with you. The guy was an animal. And I'd say then he was probably about 50 years old. And he grabbed my face with his foot, turned my face towards him and said, "Hey, boy, why you no puke today?" And I looked at him and said, "Well, Mr. Matsuda, I haven't eaten since the last time I puked." And he just turned his head, and I could see his ears lift up. I assumed he was smiling. And, after that, it was still pretty tough, but I think he dialed it down just a notch. He kind of liked me enough to want me to hang around. And then, so many people came and left, and Paul Orndorff came then, and Paul was tough. I mean, he was so tough. I learned how. I was a pretty good wrestler, and I was learning quickly how to hook and shoot. Carl Gotch was coming down. Lots of hookers, lots of different guys that could wrestle, from Jack Briscoe to Bob Backlund, and we had a guy that pulled the ring, and God, this guy was he was really tough. His name was Gordon Nelson, and Gordon has a son that's a very good shooter as well, hooker. And because in our business, like a shooter is a wrestler,
Mhm.
and a hooker is somebody that knows how to break bones and put you in compromising positions you obviously don't want to be in. The illegal moves in amateur wrestling, because it's bone against bone, and they're all dangerous.
Right.
So I had a lot of wonderful teachers, a lot of guys that took their time with me, and being there for 3 summers, just about so many of the guys would come down, especially since I was such good friends with the Briscoe brothers. Everybody loved the Briscoes, and Eddie Graham, of course, God bless Eddie. He got to really like me, and my parents were divorced, so he became almost like a second father to me.
Mhm. Were you friends with Mike Graham
Yes,
at all?
yes.
Yeah. Sad
Actually,
story. Yeah.
before Mike passed, we were business partners.
Oh, really?
We owned 10 acres of land together, and it's very sad, to see him go like he did, and um, so many of the guys, it's rough,
Yeah.
too young, just too young. I was recently at Bray Wyatt's funeral, Wyndham Rotundo,
Right.
and Mike and Stephanie both are friends of my wife and I, and
Mhm.
I've been friends with Mike for a long, long time. And Bray Wyndham was only 36 years old, 4 kids, and it's just tough.
That one really shocked the whole world, I think. Bray's passing. We did a whole episode tribute to him. The like I think the day of, actually. And I just can't believe it. He was so young. You know what I mean? I guess he was suffering some sort of health issue that not a lot of people really knew about, or the public, I should say, didn't really know
Well,
about.
the real issue is he got the vaccines
Yes.
were forced on him, and if you look, there's an actual study from the British Medical Association, and they've concluded that 1 out of 73 people since the beginning of the vaccinations have died from complications, from heart complications, and that's a high number,
It
one out
is.
of
Yeah.
73.
Yeah.
And Wyndham got COVID really bad, and he had to leave. I think that's pretty well known that he had to go home for several months and heal. And he had problems ever since that COVID. He actually went to the heart doctor that morning, that very same morning when he passed. This is Mike telling me this, so
Mhm.
it's the truth. And Mike said he went to the heart doctor that morning and made some phone calls, uh, laid down, and went to sleep, and he never woke up. I
It's
guess
terrible.
we're all going to pass. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
fact. We're passing through, and I guess you know he didn't suffer, and that's the best thing. The only salvaging thing that you could possibly think, the only positive thing that you could possibly think of the whole situation, but to leave 4 beautiful children behind, it's tough.
Yeah. I feel bad for him, his family. It's just an awful situation.
No, it's terrible. My wife and I lost our oldest son 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and 29 years old. It was the most horrific thing, and nobody understands until it happens. It's I told Mike, sometimes I sit and think I just wish somebody would knock on my door, and I'm not kidding, and say, hey, Brett was my dad, and I mean, obviously I'd want to prove that, but
Right.
at least you'd have something to carry, his genes on.
Mhm.
And Mike has 4 beautiful kids, so that's the biggest, the most uplifting thing I could really say to Mike about that. It's something that never leaves you, but with time it gets a little bit easier when you have good friends and good family around you. You'll never He'll never be over it. I'll never be over it. Any other person that's gone through that, they'll never be over it. It's just when you have that, you're just not supposed to live longer than your children. And that's
I
tough.
I lost a child 20 years ago,
Oh,
actually.
I'm so
So,
sorry.
and
Well, you know,
yeah, I do. I mean, it was only a few months, but it was still, the impact. It was I had twins, and the other one never came home, was in the hospital for months and months and months. And I don't think I've ever discussed this here on the show before, but it's one of those things where you're constantly in the hospital. You're constantly, like, every single day visiting that baby, and you're stressed, and you're crying all the time. And then one day they just say, "Hey, you got to come here right now," and then it happens. And
mm,
it was not an easy thing, but as you said, over time, it never leaves you, but over time it does get easier. But there's times, plenty of times, to just sit there and think what would have happened over the last 20 years.
right. It's probably, especially when you look at his sibling,
Yeah,
is that a boy or a
it's
girl?
a girl. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Whew. Mm, I'm sorry.
No, no, man, it's understandable. It's understandable. uh let's talk about something brighter. Sorry.
There you
So,
go.
no, I mean, it's real sad. It's real hard to think about. It's almost hard to move on, I guess, you know what I mean. But so you actually made your debut in Florida against Ivan Koloff and Pat Patterson.
Yes, I had a
Yeah.
tag match, Skip Young and I.
Skip Young.
He's
Oh,
another
Skip
great
Young,
guy.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, I love Skip. And it was pretty they gave us a good match. I mean, because they were very smart. They knew that you're only as good as the people you beat.
Right.
And I was green and Skip was already a pretty decent hand. And so they made Skip shine and chicaned me. In other words, they threw me out of the ring and pinned Skip. And it was, I was happier than the lark that just made it through that. And I was in the ring with two legends like Pat Patterson and Ivan Koloff.
If I remember correctly, did Skip Young have a? Maybe it's not the same guy. Did he ever run in world class? It's not. Maybe
Yes, he
it's not the
did.
same. He did. Okay, I'm not crazy. Okay,
Yeah,
that's where I remember him mostly from. When I tried to find your opponent when I was doing research, couldn't find who it was. But
yeah,
yeah,
Skippy.
yeah, I remember him from world class. You had a short run in world class, which I never knew about. Or I
I had
think
a
it was a
long
big.
run. I had
Oh,
a year and a half running world class.
yeah. So that was about a year, right, from what I understand, right?
I lived with David Von Erich.
Yeah. What was that
And
like with the living with David and working there?
I loved it. I really
Yeah.
did. I loved it. I loved the family. I became very close with the family. I still talk to Kevin and gone to Hawaii to see him a couple times, and we'll probably go again within another 3-4 months. I'll head back to Hawaii. I'll see him again. Yesterday was Don Morocco's birthday, and happy birthday, Don, if you watch this, and Steve Keirn's birthday as well. Um, so these guys were heroes to me. I mean,
Mhm.
Don Morocco, talk about a guy that could work, but he was amazing. I mean, all the way from Florida to New York, where I was worked with him in Hawaii. I loved working in Hawaii. I'll get back to the Von Erichs, but
Mhm.
Hawaii was an awesome territory. I worked a couple 6 week tours there and stayed at a place called the Ambassador Inn, and we'd go island hopping. For our we'd work in usually 4 islands a week during the 6 week tour, and in all the islands, Molokai, all the Kauai, and just fly there. And it wasn't a lot of money. We didn't make a lot of money, but it was
Right.
just beautiful being there. I remember Kevin Von Erich. He was on both my tours too. He would always rent one of those tourist bikes where he could put somebody in that little rickshaw in the back and he'd
Right.
haul
Right.
around and make extra money in the evening time. And he was an energetic, he was more of the entrepreneurial spirit between all the boys.
Right.
But Fritz, back to Dallas, Fritz would, he'd put $100 bill in my paycheck every single week when we got paid, I had an extra $100 bill, and he told me that was to watch out for the boys. And I don't know if obviously I didn't do a good enough job, but I tried to be a leader around him. They were, there's only so much you can do and be a friend, a trusting friend at the same time. And we had some great times. I'll never forget being on it. Kevin, Carrie, David, and I were on horses, and Fritz had a lot of property, and there was a cemetery. And I remember Carrie wanted to go by the cemetery because I don't know if it was his great aunt or his uncle or somebody like that. And all four of us, we got right by the cemetery, and all of a sudden the horses raised up. Nobody fell off their horse. We all held on, and they just started backing up, all four of them. And it was they didn't want to be anywhere around there. We had to take off. I don't know. That's the weirdest thing. And I cannot explain that to this day. They couldn't explain. Nobody can explain that. And I guess it was the first time they had ever been there on horseback. But I don't think they ever went back because the horses were freaked out.
Probably felt the aura of the entire area, possibly.
Spirit, man, I guess.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, now this is probably going to be a little comical at some point, but the going to Central States.
Central States was a lot of fun too, except the trips were too long. Guys like Tank Patton, he was a heel, and they didn't like the baby faces and heels riding together, but I would always ride with Jesse. Jesse and I were like glue, Ventura. Mm-hmm. And he was amazing to ride with. He'd just sit and rock, and had his dip in his mouth and rock. And I was never a follower. I was always a leader. I never dipped. Even when in college, we'd be playing hearts or spades, and if there were 6 of us playing, there'd be 5 little spit cups, and I'd never have one. That nobody ever did that, because my grandfather was very wise, and I used to help him bale hay when I was growing up in the summer times in Arkansas, and he had a few hundred head of cattle and lots of pigs and fences to fix and hay he'd grow the hay, and then we'd cut the hay, then he'd squeeze the hay, and then you'd rake the hay, and then after you rake the hay, you'd bale it into these 60-pound, 70-pound bales with the twine, and then he'd let me put the pickup truck in second gear, and I'd go like 10 feet, and he'd load up those bales and go 10 more feet, load up those bales. And I was 10 and a half years old. It was right before I was getting ready to move to Gary, Indiana. From Gary, Indiana to Tampa, Florida. And Grandpa always chewed Copenhagen. And I kind of really admired that at the time. I thought, wow, that's really cool. And one time I asked him for some. He said, no, you're still too young. Stay away from this stuff. So this summer I said, well, Grandpa, I'm 10 and a half years old. And I said, that makes me half a man. And he just kind of smiled. Said, half a man, huh? And I said, yeah. And I said, I think I should be able to get a half of that dip right there that you're doing, just a half. And I think that kind of amused him. So he thought for a second. He handed that black and red and white can toward me, Copenhagen can. And I looked at him, and just to make sure I was not getting too much, and I put that little dip between my lip and my teeth there. And boy, I felt so good, and like I was really growing up. And got in the pickup truck, and things started to spin a little bit. By the third round, I'm tapping out. There's no more. I'm tapping out, and I'm puking everywhere. There's nothing. By the hour, there's nothing left in me. And so, oh gosh, he just grabbed the fishing pole and went down to the creek and went fishing, and left me in the truck there. And that was a hard lesson for me. I never, ever, ever, I didn't like to even smell a tobacco product after that.
No, it's I remember my uncle let me try it when I was probably 8 or so, and I just remember the bitterness. It burned my inside of my jaw like that. I
Yeah,
just never touched it ever again. I was too
that's
grossed
funny.
out.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I've heard of people, when they were younger, their uh, dad get them drunk. I've heard a few people tell me this until they got sick,
Yeah,
kind of monitored them, not so they would yeah, be in any life danger or anything, but make them puke. And they didn't like alcohol after that. So that maybe there's something to that.
different times, really. Seriously. I don't think people do that today, really.
No, 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 no. You'd get arrested for that.
Yeah. So you won the junior heavyweight title from Ron Starr.
Yeah.
Tell me about working with Ron Starr, Rotten Ron Starr.
He was a great worker.
Yeah.
Great worker. I loved working with Ron Starr. I tell you, him and Jimmy Garvin.
That guy's a guy that doesn't really get spoken about today. I mean, Ron probably less than Jimmy Garvin, but Jimmy Garvin was an absolute beast. That guy was amazing, I think.
He was tremendous. In Florida, we had this territory on fire. And it was first it was Jimmy Garvin and I, and I was a top babyface. He was a top heel. And it was Rick Rude and I, and we'd have just some tremendous, ravishing. Rick Rude was ahead of his time too. Him and Jimmy Garvin both, but some great people cut their teeth in Florida. Really super talent, just Jim Neidhart, and a lot of good guys during that time. Worked a lot with Kabuki and Kendo Nagasaki, and J.J. Dillon was here, and Coco Beware with Norvell Austin and PYT, the Pretty Young Things. Yep. We had Eddie was so smart about so many things. And, J.J. Dillon was a tremendous manager. He could speak great. And yeah, those people just, they get so much heat.
Yeah.
And then David Von Erich came down and with under Dory Funk Jr. And this is after I had left Texas. And David became such a good heel. We had a match at Robards Arena in Sarasota one time, and the people stood up the whole match. I mean, they were just so into that match. I mean, I'll never forget that. I mean, it was sold out, packed. David had big heat, and it was really good. Really, really good.
I think the only time I've seen him work heel was in St. Louis, personally, like from what I've seen. I've never seen him work heel in Florida. I'm gonna have to see if
he was
I can
a
find
heel in
that footage.
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I just got some footage from Howard Brody that nobody's seen, unless you were at the Armory that night. That Howard had sent to me with some matches with Steve Keirn, and Steve Keirn and I as tag team with the Bushwhackers before he turned on me, and a couple other matches that are in there. And just kind of trying to think of what to do with those.
Well, this was later on, correct? When was this?
Yeah, this was later on.
Like in the 2000s?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I read something about that last night, actually, with the so Howard Brody gave you that. Howard Brody, didn't he pass last year, right? I think.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
He's a very nice man. Or a year before.
Yep.
My brain is. Yeah, he was a very nice man. We spoke on a semi-regular basis, trying to get him on this program, but it was always football season. And every time I tried to get him on, so he was busy on the necessarily pretty much the days that I'm able to record, which is mostly Mondays. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you got to work. You got to feed the family. So whatever it takes.
Absolutely. So let me see where else we went. So in 1985, you signed with WWF, but you had worked there a couple times before, correct?
Yes.
Mostly as a preliminary gentleman, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I started out in preliminary. I was mid card and worked with. I had a lot of fun and a lot of good matches there. Teamed up. There's a YouTube match you can watch with Bob Backlund and I against Killer Carl Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. And there's some other matches from the WWF just, and then they just switched to WWF. They dropped the F days, 81, 84, I believe, or 82 and 84.
Yeah.
And I came back to Florida. Well, 83, I came back to Florida, became the Florida heavyweight champion the second time. I remember when I left the second time, when I left WWF, Vince wanted me to come to Florida again, and because Eddie wanted me back, and they were very close. And so I said, sure, I go back, and more than happy. And he wanted me to come back and work for the Intercontinental title. And so I said, that's great. That's perfect. And told me that, Eddie was going to put me on top right away. And so everything was good. Well, when I guess it was 83 still, when TBS was really hot, really got hot, and Tony Atlas, Mr. Wonderful, Tommy Rich was he a hot baby face? Ole, just a lot of great talent. Ernie Ladd, they had the territory really rocking and rolling, and they decided to see what they could draw off cable television. So we went on those first shows. Tito Santana was there. All of us. We went to Ohio, to the Dayton Center, Columbus. Went to Wheeling, West Virginia, and these shows were packed. And the McMahons saw the power of cable television, how strong it was. But Vince was. I still have some NWA notes from Leroy McGurk, where it shows who all was in attendance, who they voted in as a world heavyweight champion, how much the champion was going to get paid, which at that time was 10% of the gate, how much the Giant was going to get paid. If you had the Giant and the champion on the gate, you were talking 18 to 20%. There's a breakdown of the whole gate. And but they drew. So obviously they were worth it, or the promoters wouldn't have booked them. But Vince McMahon Sr. would be there, and he was and even Vern Gagne. And Vince Sr. was very loyal to the NWA guys because he grew up with them. They switch champions, or have champion against NWA champion against the WWF champion, Bruno San Martino or whoever. So, he wasn't about to, during his time living, seek cable, but him and Junior discussed it. And Vince Jr., after Senior passed, wound up negotiating with the guys that owned the wrestling show. Actually, the Briscoes, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, owned either 5 or 10% of it at that time. At one time, I know they owned 10%. They either owned 5 or 10 at the time. And Vince bought the rights for TBS, and he had the USA Network. So he had like a monopoly on cable television on the rest.
Yep.
You remember that?
Yeah.
And so it turned out where Vince needed the money for WrestleMania and sold it back to Turner for $1 million less than what he paid for it.
Jeez. I think there was a lot of fans that were upset too, viewers that were upset that Georgia wrestling wasn't on anymore as well.
Of course,
that probably played a lot into it as well. I think that the ratings on TBS weren't that well, from what I understand.
Well, obviously they were good enough to pay double. I mean,
yeah,
it was more because I know Gerald. I'm very close with Gerald, and he can tell you every detail. Gerald Briscoe, and they were, him and Jack were ecstatic because they made double again on their money. And So that was a historic thing in our business, a very historic thing. And then other cable channels emerged. So, Vince wound up being on a couple other cable channels, USA, and what was the other cable network he was on?
I can think of USA. I
And
just
then
trying to
anyway,
blank. Yeah.
and of course, long story short, he's on Fox now. The
Yep.
products on Fox. So they've really expanded. I mean, the business has grown and grown, and it's nice to see that so many, especially the guys that trained under Steve Keirn, nobody has been involved in the life of training, because you don't learn everything from one person, as Steve says, of course, you know that. And but Steve was their coach, and he had to he had the FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, and that was the training ground for WWE and for years. And so Steve would train the talent, go out and procure the shows, book the talent. I mean, run the shows, run the television. He had to do A to Z. And talk about somebody that really worked in the business. And he has more. I mean, just recently at our Cauliflower Alley Club, at our 57th reunion, just less than 2 weeks ago, he when I say CM Punk was the Mike Mazurki honoree,
Right.
and him and I talked a lot, and he was just so respectful of Steve Keirn. I mean, it was amazing. And a lot sometimes CM Punk gets a bad name, but he was always, every time, extremely respectful to the older guys, to the veterans. He was extremely respectful, and I'll always remember that, appreciate that class. And most of the guys are like that worked under Steve Keirn. I mean, John Cena, everybody, the Bella Twins. He trained so many people. It's crazy.
I think the whole CM Punk getting a bad name thing, or people talking about him, it's all a lot of what the people read. They tend to make even worse. The fans, I guess, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because it's this age, the internet fans. There's internet fans that just love to read online, and then they make a bigger deal of everything.
Of course.
And my thing is, like, he was hired by AEW, and I think that he just tried to offer his knowledge and experience, and a lot of these young guys didn't necessarily want to listen. And you've had kids that a lot of young people tend to think they know everything.
Exactly.
So I don't think that he's necessarily a bad guy. And obviously, I've heard nothing but positivity from the Cauliflower Alley Club. Sorry, it's a tongue twister. So experience. So I've heard nothing but positivity and people posting about it. Bob Cooks posted about it. Herb Simmons spoke about it on the episode I did with him. So that's just my opinion on the whole situation, that maybe the people at AEW just didn't care for his experience and him trying to help them get better.
Yeah, at least it was the one guy who I've never met, was it Orange Cassidy or whatever, that he had the altercation with over the glass. I don't know if you
that was Jack Perry.
Or Jack Perry. Yeah, Jack Perry.
Yep.
Jack Perry. Yeah, he was the Jungle Boy or something. Jack Perry. Right. Jungle Boy.
It was Luke Perry's son, the actor.
Right.
Yeah.
Luke Perry's son.
Yep.
So I understood Phil's side of the story, CM Punk's side of the story. I would have been upset about that too. Breaking glass, you're going to break real glass, and then the guy's got to go work afterwards, on that canvas with the glass on it. Some people don't like thumbtacks and glass in their back and stuff. There's people that still have MRSA from the ring, from the canvas,
right,
and it never leaves your body. It's staph. It never leaves your body, and it's affected some of the boys all their lives. And the younger kids, they don't understand that. They just, oh, well, it's just a little cut, a little glass. Well, there's so many sweaty bodies on that canvas, and it's not like it gets washed after every match. You got to go put your back on that same canvas. So, it's like having sex without a condom. You're just leaving yourself wide open.
Yeah.
Whatever's out there. So you've got to, if you look at the whole picture, you've got to understand Punk's side of the story.
Yeah. Which I totally support his side of the story. Like
Yeah.
with that, So you've wrestled for the WWF, you and Jimmy Brunzell. How did that whole thing come about? With you teaming you guys up?
Okay, it came about, as I mentioned earlier, I was going to go back and wrestle for the Intercontinental title versus
Right.
via Vince Senior, who put the B in front of my name. One time I called, I had to return Vince's phone call, and the secretary told me to call Mr. McMahon. So at that time, Mr. McMahon was Mr. McMahon Senior. God
Right.
bless him. What a wonderful man. And so I called him back, and we're talking about various stuff. He was just a great personality, and he kept asking me, "What's that B name they call you? Beep, 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 beep." He kept saying beep, beep, beeper, and because I've been called from Bieber to Beeper, and it's actually my nickname was Bieber, and I never wanted anybody to know about that. But my mom, on my first match that you mentioned, the tag match, my mom's always been, she lives in my guest house, actually. I love my mom, but she calls up Charlie Lay at the front desk and says she wants to speak to Buddy Colt, because she actually knows who Buddy Colt is.
Right.
So Buddy Colt, Charlie says, "Hey, Buddy, Mrs. Blair wants to speak to you." And I kind of heard that out of my corner of my ear. Oh my God, what is happening? Buddy went and he made sure that right in front of all the boys, Dusty's sitting there with his cowboy boots up on the desk there, television, where where you're kind of hidden, locker room area. And Buddy Colt comes in and he says, "Hey guys, listen, I just talked to Mrs. Blair, and Brian's having his debut match today, and Mrs. Blair said she didn't want anybody hurting her Bieber." And you got to imagine how embarrassed I was. So Buddy goes, "Bieber? I never heard her call you Bieber. I've been around you a long time." He said, "I told her she better never say that. I can't believe she said that." And so Dusty right away goes, "Beeper? Golly, Beeper. Oh, I love it. Beeper Blair. We got to call you Beeper. Beeper Blair." Oh, gosh. And then they just all went on, started ragging me. But so Vince, fast forward, Paul Orndorff, and he'd call me Bieber and or Beeper, one or the other, depending on who it was. Some people knew that their correct name was Bieber, and some people knew it was Bieber but still called me Beeper because of Dusty, like
Right.
Joe Briscoe still does, and or Steve Keirn does, but and others. But anyway, he said, that's a little confusing. He said, "I got a phone book in front of me." He goes, looking through this phone book. I don't know if he was in Connecticut or New York. He says, "There's a lot of Brian Blairs in here, but I don't see any B. Brian Blair." He said, "Why don't you just simplify it and be B. Brian Blair? It's a little more catchy." I said, "Oh, that sounds great." So I was in Florida, started the B. Brian Blair, and I was Mr. B at one time. Anyway, went back. I thought I was going back to, be part of the race for the Intercontinental title. And Hogan was there, Hulkster, and he's one of my best friends in the whole world, just like Steve Keirn. I mean, they're really, really tight. And Hulkster says, "Hey, Brian." He doesn't call me, once in a while he will, but he usually calls me Brian. So he said, "Brian, Vince wants to start a tag team division." And he said, "This is not an ordinary tag team division. He's going to bring in a ton of talent, and he's going to make tag teams so relevant." And we were just thinking about Jim Brunzell and you together. What would you think about that? And I said, "Well, I said, are we in the plans? I mean, in other words, are we going to be the top on the top in the tag team division? I don't want to just come there and be mediocrity. He said, oh, no. You guys get strapped. You guys going to, be the number one babyface team. I said, okay. And what about Jim Brunzell? I said, I've read about him in magazines. How's he? Oh, he's great. Because Terry had been in that AWA the whole time, and him and Jimmy were friends. So Jimmy and I met in Brantford, Ontario, Canada for the first TV. And we were together, and George Scott was the booker, and George Scott had fired Jimmy. He didn't really, it's like almost that Hulkster had more rub with Vince Jr. than anybody. And so he really wanted Brunzell in there. And actually, Jimmy had sued Vince Jr. right before we were a tag team because I guess Vince knew that Greg forged Jim Brunzell's name for some action figures. And then, Jimmy didn't know about that. He wasn't even included. So he sued and actually won. And all this happened because this was about a 6-month process, 4-month process. And then, we met in Brantford, and we weren't the Killer Bees yet. I didn't know him and George had heat, but apparently they buried the hatchet. And at least we thought so. And he came with it. He says, hey, you guys need to think of a tag team name, something catchy. And Lanny Poffo there was all kinds of talent around, but I remember Lanny Poffo having this big hockey bag. And he said, you've got an hour. We've got an hour before you guys are on. So, you got to think of something as soon as you can. And I'll ask Vince. And before he said, I got to go over there right now, and I'll be back. Give you guys a few minutes to think of something. So I didn't know he was still in the room, but he was over talking to somebody. Thinking Blair Brunzell. And I started thinking of the 82 Dolphins, the undefeated Dolphins, Bonacani and Baumgarten, and all the linebackers were the Killer Bees. So anyway, I said, Jimmy, how about the Killer Bees? The Killer Bees. Yeah, that's great. Killer Bees. And George comes back, and how about the Killer Bees? And Lanny's listening to everything. George says, oh, the Killer Bees. I love it. Let me go ask Vince. He comes, he was quick too. He comes back and he goes, you guys are the Killer Bees. Vince loves it. And when he said that, Lanny Poffo reaches down in his bag and he pulls out a couple pairs of Killer Bee trunks. I mean, black and yellow trunks with a stripe. Hey, that's great. That goes perfect with the gimmick. So those were the original trunks that we wore. And I actually still have my pair.
Wow.
The bees were born. And
that's pretty
we started buzzing. And I tell you what, we were promised the belts 3 times, right? Mm-hmm. Three different occasions. We win the Survivor Series. We win the Jack Tunney tournament. Mm-hmm. And we were the hottest tag team on the planet. And nobody could deny that. We were the absolute hottest tag team on the planet. We were doing Toyota commercials, wrestling album commercials, all kinds of action figure commercials. And, the first time George said, well, we're going to hold off on the belt switch right now. And because the money's in the chase, number one. And second thing he said was, that was the first thing he said. Money's in the chase. It was the second time when he said to us when we promised the belts, he goes, don't be discouraged. He said the reason you don't have the belts right now is because you're such good workers. He said if you're a good enough worker, you don't need a belt to get over. And he's saying this stuff to us, and I know better. I'm saying sooner or later we got to win the belts, or the people just they're not going to believe you're going to win the belts. We
Right.
beat the Hart Foundation in non-title matches when they had the belts. We beat Dynamite and Davey Boy when they had the belts in non-title matches. We beat Valentine and Beefcake when they had the belts in non-title matches. It just get down to it, and we didn't get the belt. So then we went on a 67-day tour. Valentine, Chic, Junkyard. We worked 67 straight days in a few different countries. I'm listening to Jimmy, so upset that he's missing his kids' graduation or recital. And started to get really depressing and long and hard. My body's sore. And Pete Gronkowski was a friend of mine that owned Gold's Gyms. He was a 54% owner of Gold's Gyms corporate. And I kind of always wanted to own my own Gold's Gym. And, Jimmy and I are kind of opposite in a lot of ways. I love him to death. He's like a brother to me. But he said, you don't want to ever have a gym, because he had a gym when we were first together in White Bear Lake, but it was a small gym in a smaller town. And Gold's Gym in Hillsborough County, where Tampa is, there's Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City. It's a big municipality with over 1 million people at the time. Now there's over 1.5 million, almost 1.6 million people here. And so in Salisbury, Maryland, I pulled Vince to the side and I said, Vince, I'm tired. I said, you guys have promised us the belts 3 times, still don't have the straps. And I said, I got to quit. I'm going to give you I'm giving you my 2-week notice now. He said, why do you want to leave? I said, Vince, I'm tired. We just worked 67 days in a row. We don't have the straps. So I just want the same thing. And he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to, open up a Gold's Gym probably. He said, well, what if, let me go to the drawing board and, let's create something. And I said, by this time I had already got married in 86, and it's getting close to 89, and said, I don't think anything's going to change my mind, and I want to leave here on good terms, Vince, and appreciate everything so much. And I was really humble about that. I was very sincere. And so I gave Vince my notice and opened up Gold's Gyms, and it was great. I still had my deal in Japan because I had been going to Japan, so I got to go to Japan. And then a really cool deal happened with not Herb Abrams yet, but with the
AWA.
With trying to think of the promoter's name of the IWA.
Was that Eddie Mansfield?
No. He had the IWA one. I'll think of him in a minute.
I know what you're talking about. I just can't think of the guy's name.
He had sold shows every weekend. So
yeah,
you would work 2 days, sometimes Friday and Saturday, sometimes a Saturday and Sunday. And it would be sold either to military or Indian reservations or casinos.
Mm-hmm.
And he was booked. I mean, I was booked every weekend for a year, and I was making good money. I was making good money, and I was happy. I had the gyms, and I went from 1 gym to 4 Gold's Gyms. I sold Steve Keirn 20% of one of my gyms. He was the best manager I ever had, best partner I ever had. We didn't even have a contract. And I sold the clubs when they weren't for sale, and I've been an elected county commissioner, so it's posted, how much I sold my gyms for $2.1 million when I had debt free, and I charged Steve Keirn $20,000 for 20% of the Tampa Palms gym, and at that time it was worth at least 40 grand, 50 grand, and I wrote him a check for either, I know it's 150 something or 170 something $1,000, whatever my accountant told me that I owed him based on the valuation of the clubs. And man, he was ecstatic. Steve was ecstatic. And again, we didn't have a contract, but I've always been fair and everything. I've always been honest and fair, and it's been a good thing for me. I don't have anything to hide, and I like it that way. But in politics, they turn everything into something dirty and ugly that's not true. Simply not true.
Yeah.
They'll take something that's so fabricated and turn it into the biggest lie. And politics is definitely a full contact sport. It's brutal. You
Yeah.
can just put an R after your name or a D after your name, and almost half the people don't like it. But anyway, Gold's Gyms were a great experience. So I almost wish, and I still got to wrestle the whole time, never stopped wrestling. I had my last wrestling match in 2019 for Troy Peterson at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And I had wrestled for him for several years before that. But I wrestled actually too long. My body was just, I was too old to be wrestling. It's a tough sport. And if you want to perform, and you're just not made to take bumps and in your late 50s, and it's just it was difficult. 60 years old. So eventually, I had back surgery. I was fine a couple of years, and I'm very, very active. I love the gym, love horticulture. I love to just be outside, to work, to fish, to do anything that's activity. I love a lot of things, and so I needed a second back operation, and during that back operation, my hemovac tube that goes in your back fell out. It was like during COVID, and I don't know if it was the nurse or the nurse's tech or somebody. I had to pee. I remember I had to pee. I sat up, and my walker was right there. They get you up the day after surgery to walk, and my walker's right there, and I can't find my urinals. I'm waiting. Now I'm about to pee the bed. I sat up, got in my walker and started hobbling, and I looked down, and I see all this blood everywhere, and it freaked me out. I mean, it just freaked me out. The whole floor was covered in blood.
Oh my
goodness. I went and sat back down on my bed, and I'm going, where am I bleeding? I'm looking everywhere. Where am I bleeding? And so I hit the emergency button. They have a button if it's an absolute emergency. So I hit that button, and boom, like less than 15 seconds, some lady comes running in, looked like the nurse to me, and she comes up, she says, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" I said, I don't know what happened. And she's looking, and she comes right up to me, and she looks down, and she goes, "Oh, it's your heme." And I'm still like dumbfounded, and she reaches down and pulls this plastic thing, the thing that was in my back fell out, and she said, "Turn around." And she just came in, picked it up. I'm sitting on the bed, poking me. It seemed like it was like 2 minutes because it's a tiny little hole, and she finally got that thing back in there. And it just never stopped bleeding. And so anyway, I got osteomyelitis, which is staph infection in my back. And that caused me to be crippled. I lost function of my entire lower body. I couldn't walk. I couldn't pee. I couldn't poop. I couldn't do anything. And I had to be hauled away in the ambulance. And they did emergency surgery, and I was in absolute misery, unbelievable misery for 2 years. Longest. It was like somebody was stabbing me and beating me up every day for 2 years. And
Yeah.
I was ready to really check out. I just, even having a wonderful son and a wife and mom and dad, I was sisters, siblings, parents. I was just didn't care if I lived or died. And by happen chance, I wanted to get well, and I found a doctor who was an amazing doctor. Had gone to 6 different doctors before I found this doctor, and he fixed me. I mean, I still have some pain, and I'm not perfect, but wow, I mean, at least I love life now. I'm just happy to be alive again. And it's a lot of therapy ahead and still, and things to do. But I'm very grateful, Rick. I'm very grateful. The challenges you have in life, they only make you stronger. But the one thing I would like to say, anybody that needs back surgery ever, find a doctor that you can really relate to, that really explains things. If they're short with you, or if you don't feel like you got the answers that you need, go to another doctor. Just find the one that you're comfortable with, that you can look at him and tell this guy is going to do his best to fix me. And that's what Dr. Alikani at Tampa General Hospital did. He's forever my friend. And again, anybody, I'd recommend anybody fly to him that really needed serious back surgery, because he's unbelievable. He just fixed a 92-year-old man. He fixed a 74-year-old man, and fixed a girl that had been walking sideways. She was only like 25 years old and had been from scoliosis. Had been walking like this for a long time. She's perfect. The guy's just amazing at what he does. So it's
That's
like
amazing.
Great wrestler, like or Ric Flair, that can go out there and entertain somebody every time, or even a Jimmy Garvin or a Rick Rude or Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff or Hulk Hogan, all these different guys, CM Punk, guys that can go out and Magic, Seth Rollins, all these guys that can go. Triple H always had good, guys that can go out and always perform and be a pro. Look for the pro.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That's amazing that, they were able to, fix you though. It's just incredible. Wow. I would have been scared. Like, I'm sure you were, really.
It was a 2-day surgery, so it was scary.
Yeah.
But he explained to me why it was 2 days. You shouldn't be under anesthetic for 16 hours. I can't be at 100% for 16 hours. Nobody can.
Right.
He broke things down. If I wouldn't have got a bone density test, I had to wait 3 months to get the operation, because my bone density was inoperable. I would have fallen apart on the operating table. I wouldn't even be able to do this interview now, because I'd either be dead or paralyzed. And no other doctor asked me to get a bone density test. So,
but that's not even your most
God
recent
was watching
surgery.
over me, and people were praying. And I think everybody that listens to this podcast, I thank you for your thoughts and prayers and well wishes, because it just means a lot.
That's not even your most recent surgery. Didn't you just have another one?
That was my recent surgery.
That was your recent. Okay.
A couple months ago. Yes.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm glad you're doing better. Seriously, I really am. That's a pretty scary situation.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Go ahead.
No.
I'm just going to ask you a couple more wrestling related questions, and we can move forward. And then,
I tell you what, if you really want to get some questions answered, I'll do a shameless plug for my book here.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about that book.
This book is available on Amazon, and I promise you won't be disappointed if you if you get this book and you say you heard it on PWZ podcast and you don't like it, I'll give you double your money back. As long as you can answer, I'll ask you maybe 3 questions so I can tell you read the book. So, a bunch of people trying to break me.
I'm looking forward to getting that book. I wasn't even aware that it was actually out. So I'm excited, as I'm a huge fan as well of yours. And got a lot of books. There's a book on the AWA that just came out that I'm looking forward to purchasing as well. And the gentleman that you keep referring to tonight, Steve Keirn, just released a book as well that I'm really interested in reading as well.
Yeah, Chronicles, the Keirn Chronicles. It's an excellent book.
Yeah. So tell me about your involvement, or I guess you're the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club. How did this whole come about?
This was like 9 years ago. Nick Bockwinkel was the president, and he got sick. God bless him, but he was still the president. And the board had a meeting, and I guess the Harley race was I love Harley. Harley was super guy, and Harley suggested me because of my business background. I had over 100 employees and sold the clubs very successfully, and it's very different though. Um, when running a business, when you're paying people
Right.
versus when you're running a business when everybody's a volunteer. But nonetheless, Morgan Dollar, who was on the board at the time, came up to me in Mobile, Alabama at a convention there. And I had already been to the Cauliflower Alley Club. I had been honored there once, and I was Buddy Colt's presenter on another occasion. And I enjoyed the club. I mean, it was great, and just didn't have a lot of time to go back. I was just really, really busy because I do a lot of different things. Real estate. I'm in have my hands in a lot of things, but uh, they uh, they asked me if I wanted to be the president, and I said, "Well, what is the president's role?" He explained the president's role, and so then I said, "Well, I don't know because I don't really have any say so, and I'm gonna work hard and put my name on something." They said, "Well, there in our bylaws it says the president can be the CEO too, but it's a lot of work." And I said, "I don't care, load the wagon." I said, "If I'm gonna put my name on there, then I'll take that position too." So I did, and it's a lot of work, but we've got a great board. They keep a lot of the stress off me, and they do so much. They work so hard, Rich Ingling and Ron Hutchison in Canada, and Darla Staggs, and Royal Duncan, and so many Pam Morrison and Medusa, and we've just got so many wonderful people. Vance Nevada, who does our editor, and I hate to miss somebody I know, but Bruiser Brody's wife,
Barbara. Yeah.
Barbara, Herb Simmons. You just go down the line, and all these people, Tom Sive, you keep going and keep going. Everybody's working in the same direction and pulling in the same direction. David Swaller from Global Videos, he's amazing. Mark Hoke, a radio show host in Vegas. These guys just came aboard and did some wonderful thing. We were constantly getting new people that are filling positions that we need to take loads off, and we can compartmentalize and have a flow chart and P and bylaws are adhered to. So it's just, we have attorneys and accountants, and just this year we've given away over $60,000 to needy guys that fall on difficult financial times, and whether it's taxes, or mortgage, health reasons, divorces, burials, funerals, a lot of different reasons, and we don't really discuss who we help. We don't discuss who we help unless they want us to, like Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff did, or Bobby the Brain Heenan, or Kamala, or Brickhouse Brown. We got Brickhouse Brown cancer treatment, and he was
Wow.
It was a sad thing, just he turned out to be a great friend. And when you hear the gratitude in their voices afterwards, it makes everything so worthwhile, because you can correlate, especially in the territory days. I might not have worked in Portland, but eventually the talent goes around, and you wind up working with that Portland territory somewhere, whether it's Roddy Piper or David Sierra or Human Assassin. It just goes around. Lynn Denton, those Portland guys. You can name any territory, and whether you worked with them or not, you were all connected.
Right.
And so it's like, you're helping out, brothers and sisters of the road, and it's just a wonderful organization, and it's great to be a part of.
It sounds pretty amazing. Every time that I've heard it discussed, it's to help basically guys that were in the business that fall on hard times, just like you said, and whether no matter what it is, really, it sounds like it's very helpful and influential for a lot of things. And I heard that the conventions are quite amazing as well. You got to do them yearly, correct?
Yes, the reunions are off the chart, and they fill up. They're full, and It's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. We had such great honorees. I see, Ron Simmons. Oh, golly, the acceptance speeches were amazing, and JBL has been there the last 2 years because he was the Iron Mike Award winner last year. Um, um, and he presented Ron Simmons. It was a tremendous time. I mean, the Nasty Boys. So many people. We did the first independent wrestling award, and I didn't know Rhea Von Slasher until saw her films and looked at a lot of people. We all did, and it was amazing. She is amazing. Just great speeches. All of our honorees were tremendous. Koji Miyamoto came all the way from Japan for the James Melby Award. Um, no, now I have to name everybody. Let me have a program right here. This is, excuse me, this is one of our, I couldn't have done that 3 months ago.
Right.
But this was our program, and you can see we give away the Lucha Libre Award, and Damien 666, such a humble guy, and you can see at the bottom there. And we do something called the Courage Award. Patricia Summerlin won that. Jody Malenko. A lot of guys know Dean Malenko, but everybody doesn't know Jody Malenko. But Jody he dominated Japan, and
that was his brother, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
brothers. Coco Beware. Al Burke, he won the Real Award. He's got more credits than anybody in the business for Hollywood credits. Mickey James, well, was she amazing? And Serena Deeb was her presenter. She did a tremendous job, and we are honored Killer Carl Cox posthumously. His son Cody did a tremendous job. It was so entertaining. It was off the chart fun. It really was. I mean, it's an amazing time. 2 nights when we had karaoke on Monday nights, we wrestling shows. We Ron Hutchison does a tremendous job with the seminars. We do all this crazy good stuff. So it's always a lot of fun. There's so many people. I wish I could name everybody's name, and forgive me if somebody listens to this podcast and I didn't mention your name, but everybody's vital to the organization, including our members. And the way you can become a member is to go to caulifloweralleyclub.org. And you can become a member for $35 a year for a whole year, and you get 4 copies of this, which is a newsletter that's done by Vance Nevada as an editor, and Royal Duncan publishes it. But it's a great time and great people, and I appreciate you allowing me to be on the show, Rick, to talk about it. And just thank you very much.
Thank you. And speaking of Al Burke, he was on this program probably a week before the convention, and tried to get me to go, but I was like, it's kind of short notice. So
well, you
maybe
got
next
to
time.
Plan on the 58th. I promise you won't. Once you get, it's addicting. Almost,
Yeah.
it's addicting, and we're all like family. There's no bad people there. Everybody's good, and we're talking about the internet people. There's a lot of internet people there, but Greg Oliver does a tremendous job.
He's amazing.
Wrestling,
Yeah.
and he worked his tail off, and he gets all the the internet people are, I guess, they're everywhere. People that like to criticize, but we had no. The worst. We learn something every year, and the thing that I learned, and I learn something every day. But I always try to learn more and more at the reunions. I listen to everybody, all the input, everywhere, whether it's the food or the activities, whatever it is. I listen and listen, take it, present it to the board, and we discuss it. And one thing we missed that we should have done was to let people with physical disabilities, and I should know this, I just got done having to learn to walk again, go first when we have like a buffet line the first night, and the other night is served to you. But so it may seem trivial to some people, but that's very important.
Right.
Let those that are being challenged physically right now, let them go first. So we try to be so accommodating to everybody. And if it makes sense, we're going to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brian, Mr. Blair, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on this program today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, Mr. Del Santo. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I hope to have you back someday and we can talk some more wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. We didn't even scratch the surface. And God bless you, your family, and all those PWZ. I like that Z because it reminds me of buzz and buzzing. You guys, God bless you. And I look forward to coming back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Available on all streaming platforms. It's professional wrestling's greatest, largest, privately owned wrestling library. All the classic hits, flips, slams, and pins of yesteryear are on one place. It's Ultimate Classic Wrestling. Check out the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Mr. USA Tony Atlas, Tito Santana, Rick Martel, a who's who of professional wrestling's greatest spotlight stars ever to grace the squared circle, all in one place. Grab the best seat in the house for memories and mayhem on Ultimate Classic Wrestling.